everyone. Today we are going to continue with our Chapter 4 notes. So make sure you have those out and ready to go and fill those in with me as we go through the lesson today. So we've been talking about finding the slope of a line with our rise over run, or subtracting the y's in the numerator and the x's in the denominator. So today we're going to look at how we can graph those lines from an equation or write the equation from the graph. So we'll start with what that equation looks like. Whenever we are writing an equation for a line, we're always going to use what we call slope-intercept form. And that's exactly what you hear or see here on my screen. Y equals mx plus b. And we're going to be using that a lot the rest of this year. So when we have y equals mx plus b, the m is always going to represent our slope. So fill that into your notes in that blank here. M is slope. So when we do rise over run, that's what goes right there in the equation in front of the x. Our slope, rise over run, goes right there in front of x. And then we have this b, which is what we're going to call the y-intercept. And the y-intercept is just where on the graph that line crosses through the y-axis. And we'll look at some examples so you can see exactly what I mean by that. The x and the y will always be in the equation because they represent the x value and the y value, those coordinate points that lie on the line. So the x and the y will stay. We just replace m with the slope of the line and b with the y-intercept. Where does it cross through the y-axis on the graph? Okay, so in your notes, you see that I've given you a table that looks just like this. And in the first column, we have several equations. All of those are equations written in y equals mx plus b. So each of these equations represent the graph of a line. What we want to do is just practice identifying the slope and the y-intercept in each of these equations. So the slope, the m, is always this number here in front of x. So we look for what number is in front of x. That's our slope. So in the first example, we have this 2 in front of x. That tells me my slope has to be 2. Slope is always the number in front of the x. Okay, so that means this line has a slope of 2. 2 as a fraction is 2 over 1. So we know the line is going up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1, all the way up. The y-intercept is the number on the end without the x, right? So we're looking for the number that stands alone all by itself. So here I have the y-intercept. Notice it's a negative or a minus 1. And we talked about earlier this year how a negative and a subtraction sign are really the same thing. So if it says minus 1, it means our y-intercept is negative 1, not just 1. So if you see a minus sign there, make sure you pay close attention. That tells you your y-intercept is negative 1. So this tells me that the line is going to cross through my y-axis at negative 1, and it's going to have a slope of 2, up 2 over 1. Okay? What I would like for you to do is look at the rest of those equations and see if you can fill in the slope and the y-intercept. I understand a couple of them are tricky, but do the best you can. I'm going to have whoever's here today pause the video and give you a minute to try filling in the rest of the table, and then we'll check it when everybody's done. So push play for me when everybody's finished. Okay, so now that you've had some time to try to fill those in, let's talk about them. So the next equation, y equals x plus 2. We'll start with the slope. This one was a little tricky because there's not a number in front of x. So how do we know what the slope is? Well, we know when there's not a number in front of a variable, what number is there? Think of if this is just an x, how many x's do we have? 1. So if there's not a number in front of a variable, we know that it's just a 1. We just don't write that number there. So that means that it's 1x. The slope has to be 1. Okay, again, whenever there's not a number in front, the slope is 1. The y-intercept is the number on the end. So we have this plus 2 over here. On the end, since it's a plus 2, it's a positive 2. So our y-intercept is 2. Now, the next one looks a little bit different. It just says y equals 4. What's my slope if there is no x? Slope is the number in front of x, but there is no x. Well, if there's no x, how many x's do we have? 0 x's. So if we have 0 x's, the slope is 0. 0 x's tells you you have a slope of 0. Y-intercept is always the number without the x, so we are left with our y-intercept of 4. All right, next one, y equals 3x. So slope, number in front of x, the number in front of x here is 3. Y-intercept is the number alone. Well, I don't have a number alone. If it's not there, it must be 0. This would be the same thing as saying y equals 3x plus 0, but we don't need to write plus 0. There's no reason to have that there. So since we don't write it, we know if there's nothing there, it's a 0. And the last one, slope is the number in front of x. So in front of x, I have a 1/2. Since 1/2 is in front of x, that's our slope. Number without the variables, the y-intercept. It's not just 5. Since we have that -5, that tells us negative and a subtraction sign are the same thing. It has to be a y-intercept of -5. So now we know where the slope and the y-intercept are in the equation. We're going to use that to help us graph the line from the equation. So we can see you've got this equation in your notes, y equals 1/3 x minus 4. We're going to graph that line on the coordinate plane from the equation. To do that, we follow 3 simple steps. Okay. Step 1 says graph the y-intercept. We said the y-intercept is the number without the x, the number on the end without the x. So that here is this -4 or -4. And that y-intercept tells me where on the graph it crosses through my y-axis. So I go to my y-axis and I find this number, -4. So here's our y-axis, goes up and down. We find -4 on the y-axis, and we're just going to put a point there. That's step 1. Put a point on your y-intercept. Then we use our slope. Slope is 1/3. Remember, slope is rise over run. So the fraction 1/3 tells me I'm rising 1, running 3. So from that point we just plotted, we're going to rise 1, run 3. Remember, we always run to the right. So up 1/3, we're going to plot a point. I like to do that a few times to help me draw a straight line. So I'm going to go up 1/3 again. And then I'll do it again, up 1/3. Okay. So now we've got several points. Notice they all line up in a nice, perfect straight line. And since this is y equals mx plus b, it's always going to give us the graph of a straight line. So once we get a few points in there, we can just connect them. And we're going to extend the line out past the points in both directions so that it goes to either end of our coordinate plane here. And there we can see the line for the equation y equals 1/3 x minus 4. And that's it. All right, so we're going to try another equation here. This time we have y equals 2x plus 3. You should see that in your notes as well. And we're going to graph it. Same 3 steps. Step 1, we plot the y-intercept. Y-intercept, we said, is this number on the end of the equation without the x. So this tells me that it has to cross through my y-axis at +3. So we're going to go to +3 on the y-axis, and we're just going to plot a point there at +3. We've just graphed the y-intercept. Then the second step is to use the slope to do our rise over run to get the next point. Now, our slope is the number in front of x. So my slope here is 2. We always want to think of slope as a fraction, rise over run. If I just went up 2 and stopped, that wouldn't be right, because 2 as a fraction is actually 2/1, okay? Whenever we have a slope that's a whole number, we need to make it a fraction by placing it over 1. So I make this 2/1, so now we know that we're going to rise 2, run 1, we always run to the right. Rise 2, run 1. I like to do that a few times so we can draw a little bit nicer of a line. So go up 2 over 1 a few times in your notes. And then just draw a line. Remember, we want to extend it all the way to the edge of the graph in both directions. And now we've graphed the equation. All right, so looking at the next example, we have the equation y equals negative x minus 1. We want to graph that. So again, we started our y-intercept, the number on the end without the x. So my y-intercept here is negative 1. So we go to our y-axis, go down to negative 1. We're going to plot negative 1 on the y-axis for our y-intercept. Let me get a better point there. All right, then we do rise over run for our slope. The slope is just negative x. Remember, if there's not a number, we want to think of it as a 1. If it helps to draw a 1 in there, you can definitely do that. So my slope is negative x or negative 1x, same thing. We always want to make it a fraction if it's a whole number. So to make it a fraction, we just put it over 1. And so now we know our slope is negative 1 over 1. Now, because it's negative, we're not going to rise up. When it's negative, we go down and over, still running to the right. So I'm going to go to the point we just plotted on the y-axis, and I'm going to follow my slope, negative 1 over 1. So down 1 over 1, always running to the right. Down 1 over 1. And I'm going to do that a few times. Down 1 over 1. Once we've got a few points here, we can just draw our line, extending through those points in both directions. And now we've graphed the line for that equation. Now, one thing we haven't talked about yet is when we graph these lines, what we're doing is representing all possible solutions to this equation. So any coordinate point now on this line represents a solution that would make this equation true when I plug the coordinates in for x and y. Okay, and since that line goes on forever in both directions, this line is representing all possible solutions to that equation. Next example, we have the equation y equals negative 2/3 x. So step 1 is to graph the y-intercept. Well, you might notice that this doesn't have a y-intercept, right? There's no number on the end without x. We said when that happens, it's just a 0. We just aren't going to write plus 0 because there's no need to. So if you don't have a number out here, that means our y-intercept is 0. So we just go to our y-axis and we're going to plot a point at 0. Okay, if there's no y-intercept, we start at 0 on the graph. And then we follow our slope. Here it says the slope is negative 2/3. It's already a fraction, so I don't need to put it over 1. If it's already a fraction, we have our rise over run. The rise is negative 2. Since it's negative, we're going to go down 2. And then we run over 3. We're always running to the right. So down 2 over 3, we're going to plot the next point right here. Down 2 over 3. And then we can do that a few more times. Count down 2 over 3, down 2 over 3. And once you've done that, we're just going to draw our line to the edges of the graph. Now that we've looked at some examples of graphing the equation, now we're going to practice looking at the graph and writing the equation. So here you can see we have the line graphed for us. We just need to write the equation for the line. So whenever we're writing an equation for a line, we're using our y equals mx plus b. We just need to fill in the m and the b. Okay, so you can kind of think of it as we're always using this template where we're going to say y equals something x, that's whatever our slope is, plus b, whatever our y-intercept is. So we just need to fill in the slope and the y-intercept to get our equation. Well, to find the slope, we do exactly what you learned last week, just rise over run. So we pick any 2 points on the line. Remember, it doesn't matter what 2 points you use. Since it's a straight line, your slope will be the same no matter what. So maybe we pick these 2 points. So go ahead and plot those 2 points or any 2 points on the line. And let's do our rise over run. We always go left to right, so we're going to put our pencil on the point furthest to the left. We're going to rise and then run until we meet up with the next point. Now to get to the next point, we had to go down 1, 2, 3. When we go down, it's negative, and then 3. And then we ran over 2, so my run was 2. And we make that the fraction then, rise over run. So since we went down 3 over 2, our slope is negative 3 over 2. Now that we know the slope, we just put that in the equation in front of x. So we can fill that in. We're going to say y equals negative 3 over 2 x plus, we just need the y-intercept. Where is the line crossing through our y-axis? So we look at our y-axis here, and we can see that the line is crossing through my y-axis right here. Okay, we see that. It's touching my y-axis right there at 4. Okay, we see where it crosses at 4. Since it touches my y-axis at 4, we know the y-intercept is 4, so we just fill in the second blank here with 4, our y-intercept. And now we've written the equation for the line, y equals negative 3/2 x plus 4, and we're done. So let's look at the next example. Now we have this line here we want to write an equation for. So again, anytime we're writing the equation for a line, we're going to use our y equals mx plus b. We just need to figure out what m and b are. So you can think of it as just filling in those 2 blanks. What is slope? What is y-intercept? So we do our rise over run. So let's pick any 2 points on the line, any 2 points we want. So maybe I pick this point here and follow the line up to my next point right here. Those 2 will work. Remember, any 2 points are fine, so you could use 2 different points. And then we do our rise over run. So in your notes with me, draw your right triangle, rise over run until we meet up with the next point. And when we do that, we can count that we rose up 1, 2, 3, and over to the right 1. So rise 3, run 1 gives me a slope of 3 over 1. And whenever we have a number over 1, we can make that a whole number, which is just 3. So we can say our slope is 3 over 1, or 3. And so we're going to fill that in to the equation in front of x, because the slope always goes in front of x. Then we find the y-intercept. Where does it cross my y-axis? So we go to our y-axis and we look at where it's crossing. Looks like it's crossing right here at 2. So that tells me my y-intercept has to be 2. So we fill that into our equation. That's the number on the end without the x. And we say y equals 3x plus 2. And then that's it. We've written the equation for the line. All right, so I'd like for you to give this one a try on your own. So remember, you want to think of it as just filling in the blanks. We're using y equals mx plus b. We just need to fill in the blank for m and b. So go ahead and try. Find your slope, rise over run, find the y-intercept. Where does it cross through? Write your equation. I'll have whoever's playing the video pause it now and give everybody a minute to give it a good try. All right. So you tried this one. Let's see how you did. First thing we have to do is rise over run. So we want to pick any 2 points on the line. So maybe we pick this point and this point. Any 2 points are fine. You could have picked 2 different ones. Still should get the same thing. We go left to right, rise over run. So to go from my point on the left to the point on the right, we had to go up 1 and over 2. So my slope is rise 1, run 2. Okay, so 1 over 2 gives me a slope of 1/2. So that goes in front of the x. Then we just have to fill in, where does it cross my y-axis? Well, if we look at our y-axis, it's crossing through right here when y is 2. So we say our y-intercept is 2. Hopefully we did okay on that one. All right, we've got just one more example to try, and I'd like for you to again try this one on your own without me. So I'm going to have whoever's in here go ahead and pause the video for me again while everybody gives it a try. When it looks like they're ready, go ahead and hit play and we'll check it. Okay, so again, we're just using our y equals mx plus b. We just need to fill in those blanks. So the first thing you needed to do was find your slope, rise over run. So pick any 2 points on the line. Maybe this point and this point would work. Doesn't matter what 2 points you use, 2 coordinate points on the line. Always start at the point furthest to the left and then rise. In this case, we have to go down 1 over 3. So rise -1, run over 3, gives us a slope of -1/3. Then we use the y-intercept. That's where it crosses through the y-axis. So we look at our y-axis. Looks like it's crossing through here at 0. So we say our y-intercept has to be 0. And then we just fill that into the equation. So we put the slope -1/3 in front of x, the y-intercept 0 on the end. If the y-intercept is 0, we don't have to actually write it. So we can say that the equation for this line is just y equals -1/3 x. You don't have to actually write the plus 0. And that concludes the lesson for today. So you're going to practice this a little bit in Nearpod on your own. You're going to practice first graphing the equation, plotting the y-intercept, and then rise over run, graphing your points like we did in your notes, drawing the line. Then you'll practice this here, where I give you the line, you write me the equation. So you'll spend the rest of the class doing that, and then make sure you check the stream on Google Classroom tomorrow for your remote assignment. All right, see you guys later.